Okay, hi everybody. So we are talking about how to actually be a good listener. I feel like this is something that a lot of people have questions about, and I think a lot of people kind of don't really get how to do. So I wanted to talk about it because being a listener is literally part of my job, and so there are a lot of cool tips and tricks, I guess, that I wanted to give you guys. So let's do that. So, I have 5 things here. This is by no means an exhaustive list. I have a bunch that I could make into a list, but I don't really want to make this super long. So, for now, here's 5. Okay, so number 1, I think it's helpful to clarify expectations. Asking somebody, are you looking for me to help you find a solution, or are you more interested in me just listening, or being here for you? I think a lot of people have the tendency to want to help someone fix something when they come to you with something that's weighing on them or something they're sad about or whatever. The tendency is to be oh, you should just do this, or oh, I know how to fix this, I struggled with this before, and so here, this is what I did and you should do that, which is helpful and kind, but a lot of times that's not what somebody's actually looking for. So clarifying those expectations to ask what do you need from me right now, is really useful for you as the person who's trying to be supportive, because then you kind of have an understanding of what my role in this conversation is. But it's also really useful for the person who is coming to you wanting to talk about something, because if they are looking for somebody to just listen and just be there, somebody offering advice and trying to fix it is kind of invalidating and really frustrating. And I'm sure you guys have all been on the receiving end of this at some point. So clarifying those expectations and asking what do you need from me is really useful. Number 2 is about empathy. If you don't know anything about empathy, there's a really great Brene Brown animation thing on YouTube. Google it. I'll link it in the description. But where she talks about the difference between empathy and sympathy. And sympathy usually is oh, I'm sorry. And that's it. Whereas empathy is really making the effort to put yourself in somebody's shoes. Empathy is a really good tool to use when you're trying to be a good listener for somebody, because first of all, it allows you to actually engage in the conversation in a productive way as opposed to just being talked at. But also because it just feels really good when somebody makes an effort to get where you're coming from. Empathy is kind of a complicated thing to explain. Like I said, I would really encourage you to watch that other video. But for this, basically trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and understand, or ask yourself, how would I feel if this happened to me? And what would I want from somebody who's here to listen to me? Number 3 is to not offer anecdotes about your life. And again, this is a really common one. I think a lot of people struggle with this because it is a way that we're trying to be oh, I get you. I know what you're going through. But first of all, maybe you don't, because everybody's individual life is incredibly complex and different, and there might be lots of different variables to what that other person is going through. But also, when we offer anecdotes about our own personal experience, oh, I know, this happened to me and this is what I did, what you're doing is making an attempt to relate to somebody, but what it feels like when you're on the other end of that is that you're making it about you, and that's not helpful when somebody is coming to you, especially if it's something that they're really struggling with or they're really sad about, or going through it. It's really frustrating to have somebody turn the conversation around and make it about them, and so I would encourage you to stop doing that, because it doesn't feel good, it's not really helpful, and again, it comes from a good place and wanting to be kind to other people, but redirect that into one of the other things that we're going to talk about. Okay, so these last 2 are actually kind of therapist tips. These are things that I do in session with my clients. It's something that I have spent a lot of time learning how to do, and a lot of our communication skills really are about practicing and building up that muscle memory, because the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it, and the more often it becomes your default response. So these are things that I had to work at, because they're not the typical go-to behaviors for when somebody is coming to you with something that they're struggling with. The first one is validation, and I think this one can confuse people a lot, because the tendency with validation is to think that validating somebody means that you agree with them. which is not true. You can validate the fuck out of somebody's feelings while not necessarily agreeing with like the way that they responded or the way that they behaved, or encouraging a behavior, especially if it's like an unhealthy one or one that hurts somebody else. But validating somebody is basically just making an effort to say like, I get where you're coming from. Like, yeah, I see why you would feel that way. I totally understand. That makes sense to me. You know, I think I would probably feel the same way. There are a lot of different go-to phrases that you can use when you're trying to validate somebody. But again, validating somebody's feelings especially is not the same as agreeing with their opinion or their actions. So yeah, validating somebody is a really useful skill and a great way, especially if somebody is behaving in a way that maybe is not super kind to other people, to say like, yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. I think maybe it might be useful to, you know, behave X, Y, and Z, or to like respond in a different way, but like, yeah, I get where you're coming from. I see why you would feel that way. Again, this is useful because it just makes people feel seen and heard, and it's just nice to have somebody else be like, yeah, I get it, because sometimes I think, especially when we're like sad or angry, we feel like, am I fucking crazy? Like, am I insane? Should I not feel this way? And so having somebody validate your emotions just encourages a person that like, nope, you're not crazy, you're not insane, you get to feel however the fuck you want to feel about things. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're like encouraging someone to behave however the fuck they want to behave. Okay, and then this last one is reflection. Again, this is like a very therapy-y tip. So don't feel like discouraged, I guess, if this one doesn't come as easy to you, because again, it is something that you have to practice at. And the more that you practice it and it becomes part of your vernacular, the more you'll feel comfortable putting it in your own words and sounding like you. But these last two, again, are like almost therapy techniques. Not that I'm encouraging you to therapize your friends. That's highly unethical and don't do that. But these are things that I use as a therapist to help clients work through whatever it is that they're wanting to talk about, because it allows you to be a participant in the conversation and to be actively engaged without offering your opinion, without making it about you, and without injecting yourself into their space. So reflection is basically just taking what somebody said and rephrasing it differently, which sounds like it would be really annoying, but when you do it right, it's not. It's actually really helpful. So like, for example, if somebody said, you know, yeah, that girl, I can't believe she said that to me, like, what a bitch. You can reflect that by being like, okay, so what I'm hearing is that she did this thing and it made you mad. Which again, sounds very therapy-y, but the more that you practice it, the more that you'll feel comfortable putting it in your own words. But some of the phrases that I use all the time are like, okay, so what I'm getting, or like what I'm understanding from this is that X, Y, and Z happened and you feel this way. Or that, you know, yeah, you know, it sounds like when they said that, it really hurt your feelings. Or that really made you mad. Or when they said that, you felt like they didn't respect you, or that like showed you how little they care about you, or something like that. Because again, I know it sounds like very clinical and like, you know, not like you're talking to a friend. But I would encourage you to practice this, especially if you're practicing it with somebody that you know is like safe and responsive to you, trying out like different communication styles, because it is a really useful tool. And again, it's just a way for you to participate in a conversation without making it about you or without offering advice. So yeah, those are my 5 tips for like how to actually fucking listen to people. I hope that this was useful to you guys. I know that a lot of people have like misunderstandings and like questions about how to be a good listener and how to be a good communicator. So I thought that this would be kind of useful for you guys in like a practical sense. Like you can use this in your everyday life. Hopefully anyways. So yeah, if you guys have questions, comments, concerns, please put them in the comments. I know that nobody comments, but I would love to chat with you guys. So please, you know, feel free to like write stuff there, and then like the video, subscribe to the channel, all of that stuff. Share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And that's it, I guess. Okay, bye.